Okay, so what if our most primal, most powerful human drive could actually be a path to spiritual enlightenment? Today, we're diving into a practice that says exactly that. It's called left hand tantra, a philosophy that sees sexuality not as something to be ashamed of or repressed, but as an incredible tool for waking up, spiritually speaking.
So, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start by looking at two totally opposite views of sexuality. Then, we'll get into the body's spiritual energy. After that, we'll define the two different paths of Tantra. And finally, we'll see how this whole practice goes way beyond just the physical, to embrace this incredible idea that everything is divine.
All right, first up, let's talk about these two different ways of looking at sexuality. See, before we can even begin to understand Tantra, we kind of have to unpack the cultural baggage that we all tend to bring to the conversation. When you really get down to it, it all boils down to this one single question. And how you answer it, well, that reveals this huge split between how traditional Western and Eastern thinking have approached this for centuries.
And here is that divide, plain and simple. In the West, a lot of religious traditions have historically framed sex as sinful, which naturally leads to repression and guilt. But in many Eastern traditions, celibacy wasn't really about guilt at all. It was a strategic choice. It was a way to hold on to and redirect this incredibly powerful spiritual energy.
So, what is this spiritual energy they were trying to conserve? That brings us right to our second section, the body's spiritual energy. This is where we get into the nuts and bolts of it all.
At the absolute heart of this entire system is this concept called Kundalini. You can think of it as this potent, almost electric, spiritual and sexual energy. And the belief is that it's just sitting there, dormant, coiled up like a snake, right at the base of our spine. The entire goal of the practice is to wake it up. And once it's awake, the idea isn't to release it outward in one big blast. No, the practice is all about channeling that immense power upward, right through the central column of your body. It's a totally internal journey. So how does it travel? Well, it follows this pathway, visualized as the chakra system, these energy centers stacked right along the spine. The journey starts at the basic chakra, which is our connection to the earth. It gets awakened in the sexual chakra, and then it climbs up through centers of personal power, love, and expression, all the way to the third eye, and then finally to the crown chakra, which represents complete spiritual illumination. Okay, so now that we've got a handle on the energy part, we can really dig into what Tantra even means. So let's get clear on the two different paths you can take. Now, this is really important. Despite all its modern, kind of wild associations, the ancient Sanskrit word Tantra fundamentally means control. That's it. It's a path of mastering your own internal energy for spiritual growth. So right away, you see it's about discipline, not just letting go. And this control can be practiced in two very different ways. First, you've got right-hand Tantra. This is the celibate path. Here, people work to raise that Kundalini energy using things like meditation, but without engaging in sexual acts. Then, there's left-hand Tantra, which is what we're focusing on. This path takes a totally different route. It uses the sexual act itself, but performed with incredible control, as the main engine for raising that very same Kundalini energy. Which, of course, brings us to the big question. How? How is this actually done? How does left-hand Tantra turn what is usually a fleeting moment of pleasure into this long-lasting spiritual experience? Let's get into it. This chart pretty much says it all. Think about energy this way. A typical orgasm is this super brief high peak, and then it's followed by a really rapid fall. The goal in Tantra is the complete opposite. It's to create a sustained plateau, to hold that peak energy and consciousness for as long as you possibly can. So the whole technique, the secret sauce, revolves around controlling the climax. For men, this means avoiding ejaculation. For both partners, it means stopping that total, final discharge of energy. By consciously holding back that final release, the energy that would have been shot outwards is instead redirected, sent surging right up that column of chakras we talked about earlier. But why do all this? What's the point? Well, that question takes us to the philosophical bedrock of the entire practice. In our final section, everything is divine. It all starts with this one simple but totally radical statement. Everything is divine. As the number one precept of Tantra, it means that if everything in existence comes from the divine, then nothing can be inherently sinful or separate from it. Nothing.
And man, that one idea changes everything. It reframes sex as a divine act, not a sinful one. It gets rid of this whole idea of an intrinsic right or wrong. From this point of view, any act, whether it's masturbation or homosexuality, can be a spiritual practice. What matters isn't what you're doing, but the intention behind it. Is there a vibration of love? Is there a spiritual goal? And that focus on intention is also what makes Tantra totally different from something like sex addiction, which is all about trying to fill a void, not raise your consciousness.
And this is a really crucial point. This is why Tantra is not about promiscuity. It is a deeply committed, dedicated path, and it's ideally done with a partner where you have what's described as a symbiosis of light and love. It's about a shared journey towards something higher, not just a casual encounter.
And so, that leaves us with this final big question to just chew on. What if the main purpose of our sexuality isn't really about morality or reproduction or even just simple pleasure? What if it's about energy? What if it's this incredibly powerful, built-in tool we all have for exploring the deepest, highest dimensions of our own consciousness?